that it's going.
Cool. I see the little streaming service thing. So that's a good sign.
That is a good sign.
Oh, great. You can just copy the YouTube link right from the header. So good.
I think we should be good. Looks like we've got one person stuck in the waiting room, or maybe they've been stuck there for a minute. But
we know when we're good to go. Are we good, Trent?
One sec. Yes.
Okay.
Take it
great.
away.
Well, we'll get started then. Sweet. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming out. No matter what time it is in your world. So we appreciate you guys coming to the AMA chat with Robert from Compound. So thanks so much for being here, Robert, especially at 9 in the morning PST.
Yeah, well, excited to be here, and thanks for everybody who's joining from around the world. You know, Ethereum and hacking is a global phenomena, so you know it's great to get everyone in one virtual chat together.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, so just for everybody, just for context on how this is going to run, we have some questions that we got ahead of time for people who either didn't want to brave 9 a.m. or couldn't make it due to a time zone thing. So we'll ask this first, and then we'll open it up to the crowd. So you know, if you're joining us live here on Zoom, there's a raise hand functionality on the participant tab. So once it comes to that part of the program, feel free to raise your hand and you can just ask your question directly over Zoom. So yeah, so with that being said, you know, we'll get started. And I think, Robert, a good place to start is maybe just to get a sense of kind of what led you to building Compound, and you know, what was sort of like your background ahead of time, and what got you excited about building a lending platform on Ethereum.
Yeah, great question and great place to start. So when we started Compound in 2017, there wasn't the term DeFi yet. It was one of the earlier phases of Ethereum, and you know, a lot of the activity at the time was focused on just creating tokens. There's a lot of ICOs, but there was not too many people, you know, really using the powers of the Ethereum blockchain to build, you know, what we thought at the time would be radical financial applications. And when we looked around, one of the observations that we had was that there was a lot of a focus on trading, which is coming up with the price of an asset right now. And very little work was being done on creating interest rates or the time value of assets. What's the price in the future relative to the price today? And for us, this was, you know, an important gap in what we saw as what would develop to be the market. You know, there was some early work being done by MakerDAO, but you know, the landscape was pretty empty. And so we set out to create an interest rate protocol that would allow people to either earn an interest rate over time or borrow an asset at whatever the prevailing interest rate is. And, you know, it's been a couple years in the making, but, you know, we're pretty excited to see Compound now become, you know, a relatively stable platform that other developers can build on. You know, similar to the way that we've built on Ethereum. And we're at the point now where everything we're doing is designed to ensure that Compound is as phenomenal of a platform to build on as possible. And all of the steps we're taking today, such as, you know, distributing governance and control out to the community, is really designed to make it where people feel confident that they know how Compound works and that they have a shape in the future of the platform.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, maybe we'll dive a little bit into Compound. I mean, Compound, like you said, you know, you've been around a couple of years now, and are one of, you know, really one of the best platforms in the space around this. And maybe I guess you could touch on, what do you think were some of the decisions that you made early on that led to you guys being able to have such success in the space, and overall, like what sort of was the mantra that you guys espoused in building the platform ultimately led to its success?
That's a great question. So there was a few things that were the design decisions early on that I think have stayed relatively firm for years now. So the first was, and you have to rewind a little bit to understand like what products existed. Nothing really existed. We had a core philosophy that a pooled approach to liquidity would be more effective than an order book based system for matching interest. And that was a very important design decision early on that no one had really approached yet. Uniswap didn't exist yet. Like this concept of a pool was basically non-existent. And so that was a pretty radical design decision that we had. Our first white paper, in fact, the white paper that still exists for Compound, if you go all the way back, it says, we believe that order books don't work and that you need a pool for certain types of financial products as a large decision point. So that was one, and that was, pretty radical at the time. The second is that, rather than users being able to specify, their own parameters, similar to trading, we said, let's remove all of that. Like, let's rip everything we can out. Let's just have an algorithm determine the interest rate that people interact at, instead of, Trent saying, I want, 4%, and Emily saying, I want 6%, and maybe they match, maybe not, always matching off everybody and just having an algorithm decide, what's a market clearing rate. And that was a pretty radical design decision as well. And the third decision that we made extremely early on was, and this is something I try to espouse for other people building the space, is that we wanted to focus on security over speed. This has been one of the central pillars of like what makes Compound since day one. And that was, we wanted to go a little bit overboard and extreme in sort of the balancing act between moving quickly and building and shipping and growing and doing so in a secure way. And so we've always prioritized security over speed. And that's led to us, in a span of 2.5 years, having 2 versions of our product released to the world, which when you compare that to traditional software is hilariously slow, even though our team is like, extremely fast, extremely hardworking, extremely qualified. And so that was the sort of third, key decision that we made. And I think all of that is translated into a relatively simple product that's stable, that's predictable, and is safe. And, from there, everyone else has the opportunity to sort of extend it, to experiment with it, to change it, to modify it, to upgrade it, to build new things on top that, for us, we just didn't want to include in the base protocol. The base of Compound's very simple. And we did that by removing everything we possibly could.
Got it. Yeah, it feels like, certainly like as a user of Compound, it feels very purposeful when you guys make decisions and as you've grown, and everything kind of seems like all in its time and place, right? And I think, as a user who, uses it and stores money and my assets in it, it would be, that's kind of something I'm looking for, right? I'm not looking for somebody who's trying to break things. I'm looking for somebody who's looking to do things and be good stewards, right? So maybe leading up to, a larger announcement that you guys made recently, and of course is live and have actually in the last couple of days actually had an impact on the product. Governance on Compound. You put out a blog post about it, I think a couple months ago. The first couple proposals went through, I think, in the last couple of days. Maybe you could talk about sort of the high level, larger scope decisions, right? What led you guys to build this governance type protocol? Was this always the decision you wanted to make? And just kind of walk through a little bit about it, just so that everybody on the call gets a sense as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. So there was really 2 things we wanted to achieve with Compound governance. The first was, removing our centralized ability to accidentally or deliberately break Compound. There's this concept of evolving decentralization that we've always sort of thought about and have been talking about since version 1 of Compound, saying one day our team is not going to be able to break it, even if we want, no matter what. And with Compound governance, in a lot of ways, right away, we've already achieved that. There's no one admin key. There's essentially, there's 10 million Compound governance tokens. It's almost like we've broken an admin key into 10 million pieces, right? And it creates a predictability and a security that doesn't exist without it. It's now very hard compared to what a couple months ago looked like to make changes to the protocol. It's much harder, just even if everyone agrees on a change, to make a change. So that's the first design decision. And the second design decision is we wanted there to be community upgradability. So up until now, our team has been the only one that's been able to make upgrades to the protocol. You know, we've been required to write the code. We've been required to deploy the smart contracts, to merge them in. It's fallen on our shoulders. The second goal of this has been, you know, we want the community, great developers, other teams, applications built on Compound, to be able to actually make changes to the underlying protocol. And if enough of the community agrees, for them to go through. And I actually think that over time, this is the most powerful thing that we're doing, because it takes Compound from being something that's in effect limited by the resources of one team and opens it up to, you know, the 10 million developers out there that could upgrade Compound or could make a change. You know, if you're building an application on top of Compound, there's something that the protocol can do differently to facilitate your app, you're starting to have the ability to actually suggest and make changes directly to the Compound protocol. It's not designed to be fast, it's not designed to be easy, but it's designed to be available as a wrap. That if the community needs to make a change to, you know, maintain it or upgrade it, that's available. And so I think this is going to lead to actually, over time, the fastest growth in the ecosystem, because it's going to enable there to be, instead of a team of, you know, 8 engineers, a team of 8,000 engineers working on it if they choose.
Great. And I think that that's very cool as well, right? And I think you touched on it in the announcement, is that, you know, the proposals are not proposals for what the Compound team should build. The proposals are executable code, right? And I think, you know, that also adds, I think, a very interesting level of things is, you know, if everybody can come and access and upgrade the contracts, maybe a question around security, like, are there any kind of guidelines or like rails for people to write on top of, or, you know, like what do you guys do to prevent somebody from otherwise sneaking in maybe a malicious code segment or something in their Compound upgrade, right? Like, how do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now we're in the very preliminary testing phases of just testing out the governance mechanisms and systems entirely. While, you know, the first 2 proposals, one was written by the Compound team in conjunction with third-party auditors. You know, we went through a very slow and deliberate and long development process. You know, months of work for, you know, releasing one new supported asset, right? Using all of the same methodologies that our team has always relied on. The second change was something proposed by the community. It was only a 1-line change, but it was created by the community, by an application built on top of Compound to modify the interest rate model for an asset with a slightly different one. It was straightforward because it was only a 1-line change, and our team also was able to review it and ensure that there was nothing malicious slipped in. But over time, this process is going to go entirely into the hands of the community. And so we're going to be releasing additional information over the next couple of weeks as the Compound governance system develops a little bit on how to participate, how to write safe code, how to work with it. But over time, what we envision is that the community is going to take over, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, the code repo, where that's going to be a base to merge in code, to make sure all the test cases run, to allow the community to interact in more of a traditional open source way. But a repo still is not what's on chain, right? It's still not what's actually running in the sort of deployed protocol on chain.
Right.
And so from there, you know, we're really going to, you know, recommend and expect and help develop the standards that, you know, for small changes, they're significantly peer reviewed by the community, by developers that know the protocol. And for larger changes, that they're reviewed by outside auditors. And, you know, I hope and expect that over time, there's going to be more community audit funds and audit pools and things that actually can step in and provide that service, not just to Compound, but to DeFi in general. And I'm personally extremely passionate about having more of a sort of public good of auditing emerge over time. And, you know, larger changes go through an audit. And from there, you know, I hope that, you know, the Compound governance process is conservative, is that it says we demand that something is safe. We demand that you prove it's safe and that it moves slowly. I know I'll personally, you know, vote for security always. I think there's probably going to be people in the community that are able to vote that are very focused on security. And it's going to be, a very large and public experiment. And I can't tell you exactly how it's going to unfold, but I know that I'm personally very excited about security.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, like, these audit pools and like all these different types of standards, and like, you could see that, somebody could build an app or something that's like, oh, you want to add this specific token to Compound, just press this button and stake your rep, right? So, I think there's like a lot of very interesting ideas that could be built on top of Comp and the governance protocol in general. Maybe, I don't know if you can talk about this part yet, but certainly a question we got was, how do I get Comp, right? Like, what is the distribution model going to look like? I'm just curious in general.
So we haven't announced the exact details of this yet, but at a very high level, every user of the protocol is going to wind up having a role in Compound governance. So every single user of Compound is going to be receiving Comp tokens. We're ensuring that the majority of Comp tokens are going to the users of the protocol. And over time, the community is expected to sort of take the reins and run with this. So stay tuned. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll probably be releasing more details along with the code for how we plan to distribute the token for community review. But the basic premise is that it's going to be distributed to the users.
Awesome, cool. Yeah. And I think just for the people that are hacking, if you do want to build on top of Comp for the hackathon, I think you can just get some Ropsten Comp by asking in the channel, right?
Yeah, Adam on our team built a Comp token faucet for the Ropsten testnet in our Discord. So if you go to our Discord in the governance channel and you type the phrase, please give me Comp, and then your address, it sends you Ropsten Comp. You can use that to just, build anything or hack anything you want.
Cool, awesome. Sweet, I only have a couple of other quick questions, and then we'll turn it over to the rest of the crowd, who they've been dropping a lot of questions in chat already. So it seems like they're riled up and excited. So maybe switching a little bit off of Comp, the future of ETH moving towards like ETH 2.0 in a staking validator world, and being able to earn an income by being a node validator, in that sort of context, do we have the same, does Compound change at all in that context? Does Compound keep up with that? As people find different ways of being able to extract value from holding on to assets, how does Compound adapt, and what are your thoughts around that in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think what's going to happen is the economics of DeFi are going to change. And I think it's actually going to be quite exciting because, for the first time, Ether itself is really going to have value. Right now DeFi is set up in such a way that, in general, Ether, there's no time value to it. The interest rates on Ether across the board are 0. And it winds up being collateral because of that, right? It has value based on expectations of the future, but besides processing transactions, there's not much to do besides holding your Ether. In 2.0, you're actually going to see this flip, and it's going to change significantly. And suddenly, all of the Ether is going to flow to those who are participating and validating the network. It's going to be extremely useful, and Ether is going to have a more meaningful return to it. And I think there's going to be a lot more trade-offs and opportunity costs. And so I think the very nature of Ether is going to change economically, which is good. It's great. I think it's going to pose both massive opportunities and challenges to DeFi. I think, because Ether itself is going to have an opportunity cost. And I think in terms of like how applications get built, it's still a little bit too early to tell. I think over the next like 6 to 12 months, that picture of how is, Solidity and F1 and F2 going to interact, and how's the EVM going to evolve, and all these things are going to be much more crystallized for the community. But I think we're going to have to wait and see.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to predict how economics is just going to play out like that. So, but yeah, certainly very interesting thought exercise as well. Yeah. And then one last question from the pre-question stuff is, what are some kind of maybe niche edge cases or use cases that you'd love to have Compound as part of the stack? Like, where are these like dApps that like, otherwise like certainly could benefit from having Compound, or very interesting use cases that you just haven't seen yet that, you wish that somebody built?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of use cases that open up when you start to have stable coins in multiple currencies that we just haven't seen yet. And we're still sort of waiting for Compound to support multiple currencies. But when you start having more assets, right, and more functional assets, the use cases for Compound actually go up non-linearly. They go up very fast. And so I actually think the more interesting thing to think about and to ask is, what are the use cases of Compound that are different 2 years from now versus today? So right now, for the most part, in Compound, there's a couple different Ethereum tokens, there's Ether, and there's a couple dollar-based stablecoins. When that's the structure, it does exactly what people expect. People are using Ether and a couple, Ethereum tokens to borrow stablecoins. It's like the dominant flow. What are the use cases when those aren't the assets, right? When the assets inside of Compound are like many different currency stablecoins and Bitcoin, and 5 years from now, when it's like financial securities, right? Like bonds and stocks and stuff like that, right? And the use cases become extremely different, right? And so I love seeing the experimentation of, what people are building right now. I think people should also think about like, how does this fundamentally change when you add different types of assets? Because those types of assets are coming, especially through Compound governance. So I think in the next year, you're going to start to see some very different use cases than what people are, focused on right now.
Very cool. Yeah, build for the future, don't build for now, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's that Wayne Gretzky quote, skates where the puck is going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Great. So we will open it up to the public audience here. If anybody has a question, feel free to raise your hand with the button. If you don't understand how the raising hand button works, that's all right. Feel free to ask the question on the side group chat as well. So let's see if anybody does the hand.
Arsh, it looks like you have the first question in the chat. Do you want to go ahead and unmute and ask?
Yeah. Hey, Robert. Thanks, friend. First of all, awesome AMA so far. So I just wanted to know, since you guys are pioneers in this space, what's the next best thing you're working on? And it really goes well with, if you're aiming for where the puck is headed. So just wanted to know your thoughts on the DeFi space as well as for Compound.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for us, we really view the most important next task is handing off control to the community. For us, that's where the puck is going. It's, protocols, in order to run forever, really need to legitimately be run by the community and the developers that build on top of it and the applications on top of it. And so, I think our next, period of time is focused exclusively on that. And it's better than any new feature because it sort of unlocks all sorts of new features. And we really want you to figure out like what comes next and where like Compound needs to evolve. And like, some great examples are like, some developers might decide to bridge Compound to another blockchain like Polkadot or Cosmos or Bitcoin in some way. Developers might decide that the most important thing is upgrading the risk models of Compound and how it operates and how it manages collateral. Some developers might decide that there's, crazy new things that can be built on top of it, like that we can't even imagine yet. So, our view is we just want to facilitate the experiments that the community wants to conduct. Because you probably know just as well as we do where the puck is going.
Well, I can have my best guess, but the community as a whole will probably be my best idea. So I keep you on board with this idea. So, and yeah.
Thanks, Harsh. I think we got a question in chat, and they said that they're not in a great environment to say it over audio right now, but it's a good question. So the question from Coder Dan is, what are the major differences between Compound and Aave, functionally, philosophically, or anything else?
Yeah, so Compound is focused on simplicity in a lot of ways, and it's been around for a while. There's the ability for anyone to build a product similar to Compound, and we sort of celebrate that. At Compound, we're focused on having fewer assets, more of a focus on simplicity, and being more of a platform for developers to build on top of. And for us, that means giving the developers that are building on top of Compound a say in what happens to Compound and how it evolves, and being able to actually upgrade the underlying protocol. And that's it.
Cool. I think that the next question we have is from James Young, who I assume is the James Young of Abridged.
Yes.
There we go. James, take it away.
Yeah, I had a question with regards to choosing this governance framework. Did you build your own, or did you use one like Aragon or DAO Stack? And the questioning just what led you to either building your own or choosing a framework?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we built our own. And we decided to use our own because we wanted a governance system that was very closely integrated into the protocol. We sort of have the good fortune of having, a large development team that we don't necessarily have to take a solution off the shelf. And we spent a lot of time debating and looking at other frameworks and thinking about other frameworks. And at the end of the day, deciding to build something that we thought would be the most purpose and custom built to the underlying protocol. That's because we're so fortunate to have, a lot of development capacity. And so we rolled our own full stack from the smart contracts on the bottom all the way up to the APIs and governance interfaces on top. And it's been done in such a way that we hope that over time, the rest of the community can sort of take what we've done with the comp token and the governance system and improve upon it. So the comp token itself is actually extremely custom. We built a lot of governance mechanisms directly into the token, whereas a lot of these systems are built, for different purposes. And so take a look at the comp token, how it's written, what it does. It's pretty cool. We built delegation directly into the token itself. And it tees up a lot of really powerful governance mechanisms, which we wanted, right? And a lot of other systems aren't, assume that doesn't exist. They assume that like every token's a vanilla ERC20 token and things like that. And so we rolled our own. It's pretty cool. Take a look at comp. Over time, we want comp and the way it works to be the base for other governance tokens. We want to create an EIP and like create a standard around it because we think that a lot of other projects are looking for similar governance capacity. And we hope that it sort of gets the ball rolling.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. I think Hadrian, you had the next question. I don't know if you're able to unmute and ask it.
Yeah, I can ask it. Yeah, we've seen the rates of DeFi and like Compound in particular go down. I remember like a few months ago it was about 7%. Now it's almost zero. I would like to know if you have an explanation, an insight on that. And also I was wondering if the high rate of DeFi, the 7+%, can continue to happen if we have broad adoption and mass users joining the system.
Yeah, it's a great question. So interest rates around the world in pretty much every financial market have gone down dramatically over the past couple months. I think that no market is, completely separate from any other market. And there's, I think, a pretty deep relationship between the two. And so I think, rates in DeFi are a function of rates in the real world in a lot of ways. And, we don't spend too much time at Compound thinking about the rates or thinking about what they are, where they're going. We're just building the tools for the market to exist in whatever the rates might be, whether they're super low or super high or something in the middle. So I wish I had like more data or more analysis of why the rates are what they are, but like we don't really set them, the market does. And so it's definitely been interesting to see them just dramatically come in, especially as, central banks around the world were just cutting rates extremely rapidly.
Cool. Thank you, Hadrian. I think the next question, and my apologies for having skipped this one on the list. Sorry. I believe it's from Arya, I think that's how you pronounce that name. Arya, are you available to unmute?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yep. Okay, so I just wanted to know, Robert, what your background was prior to building Compound and what brought you to that place in life.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started my career in traditional financial markets. I was, engaged in interest rate market analysis, which in a lot of ways is the seed for what Compound is today. But from 2011 to 2017, I was also an entrepreneur and software founder here in Silicon Valley. So a lot of building new products and a lot of bringing things to market. And I'll add to that real quick and just say, one of the cool things about DeFi in a lot of ways is that your background doesn't matter as much as other industries. It's really about what ideas do you have right now, and are you capable of building it? And it's really cool because background matters a lot less than if we were doing something totally different. In some ways my background's irrelevant. I just happen to have a passion for interest rates and brought that to the product that we're building today.
Awesome.
So I have one more question. So Robert, what was the eureka moment when you said that hey, this is something which we want to build? What's the story behind Compound?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so I just wanted to know your eureka moment. When did you realize that you are going to build Compound, and what led to that realization?
Yeah, so the realization came in 2017 when we saw a lot of people focused on trading assets, but very few people focused on creating interest rates for them. And we saw that as just a big gap. For us, it was just seeing that there was a hole in the market that nobody was really addressing, and that we wanted to create a solution to.
Cool.
Hi, I have a question about the comp tokens and the decision on the kind of the general ratio of how they were disseminated up between shareholders, the internal founding team, the future team members, and then distributed to users of the protocol. I don't know if there's any details about how comp tokens be distributed to users of the protocol, but I'm wondering if you might be able to share a little bit of just, I guess I'm looking for like kind of the general philosophy of how those allocations were originally chosen and how that might serve as a model for future governance systems.
Yeah, so to go back to the sort of two goals of compound governance in general, the two goals are we don't want any one address to be able to accidentally break the protocol. We want there to be essentially this concept of a multi-sig in order to approve changes, in case someone makes a grave error or acts maliciously. And the second is that we want the protocol to be upgradable by a larger audience. And so we designed compound governance and the token allocations to really try to achieve both of those purposes. Trying to think who, if you view this as a multi-sig, distributed amongst lots of people, we want, to have the keys to. And we thought it was pretty logical that, roughly it would be a quarter for the developers that built it, a quarter for, folks that helped bring it to market with capital, and half for the users. It's relatively arbitrary, but we think that it fulfills, the first piece, which is it creates what amounts to be a safe multi-sig so that no one can accidentally break the protocol, that it requires enough people to come together to say this is appropriate. And two, that it's upgradable by the community. And this is actually where the allocation matters a lot less. So one of the magical superpowers of compound governance is you don't need any comp at all in order to have a say in the system. Anyone with comp can delegate their tokens to anyone else. So regardless of how many tokens you have, it can be 0, right? You can have a good idea and you can say, I'd like to represent, the interests of the protocol. You can raise your hand. Anyone on this, live AMA, no matter how many tokens you have, you can ask for delegation. You can ask for anyone with comp to support you. And if you receive comp, you can suggest changes to the protocol. And so in a lot of ways, these questions of allocation, are less relevant for Compound than they are for other projects based on how we design Compound. We're very specific about designing the governance system for the specific allocation that matter less than if it was some other approach to voting. And so, for us, this very arbitrary, 1 quarter here, 1 quarter here, 1 half here was a good way of just breaking up, control into like essentially a multi-sig. And then, within that though, anyone can delegate to anyone. So, anyone who's called can have enough say and influence in the protocol to upgrade it. And really, it's upgradable by all 20,000 users or more.
It's just a follow-up. Is there, has the distribution of the community comp tokens been decided yet, or no?
It hasn't been announced yet. So
Okay.
in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be releasing additional information on exactly how it works. But every single user of Compound is going to wind up having comp tokens and a say in the governance of it.
Cool. Maybe we'll do maybe 2 more quick questions, one from the chat and one just as a nice feel good wrap up question. Yeah, so I guess the question 1 of that is specifically related to comp. Like as you guys sort of take your hands off on actually building out the Compound stuff, what becomes like the major milestones or KPIs or whatever that validate that comp is working for you guys? Like, what are you guys looking for and what are the major milestones along the way?
Yeah, so the most important milestone is that the community can like genuinely take over upgrading the protocol. I think the most important milestone is that, developers like you guys can, collaborate and can design upgrades and changes and modifications and get them passed. I think that's really the most exciting milestone. Other than that, there's no real milestones. It's really ensuring that the community takes over the protocol and, has the wherewithal to be able to maintain it and upgrade.
Awesome, cool. And, we'll wrap on this question. I feel like you've already sort of touched on it a bit, at least in your, advice to skate to where the puck is going. But, what advice would you give to somebody or to people that are trying to build a new product in the DeFi space today? And what are all kind of the considerations they need to be making? And yeah, it would be really great to get that advice.
Yeah, so I think in general, if you're building a new DeFi application today, you want to focus on, in my mind, doing one thing very well, making one change, making one experiment, one iteration, and leaving as many other sort of parameters unchanged. I don't think it necessarily always makes sense to try to completely reinvent the wheel. Even at Compound, we decided to build one very specific and small and simple building block, not do 9 things. The Compound protocol does really one thing, and that's it. We constantly get asked, oh, why can't it also do, this and that? And it's like, no, because like anyone can build that on top of it. Why doesn't Compound have flash loans? It's like, who cares? Anyone can build that on top of Compound, like 9 seconds, right? Like we try to say no and just do one thing. And so my, best piece of advice is try to do one thing that's simple and effective and that you can do well. And just build like, one thing. You're just testing like one economic parameter and ensuring that there's demand for it, ensuring that there's use for it, ensuring that, someone's able to use it. We've seen this repeatedly where like, sometimes the simpler the better. Uniswap is hilariously simple, right? It's a great example. Like it's trivially simple and that's its power, that's its strength. So I would say like, if you're building a new project in this space, like you kind of want to bring something to market that's simple and safe. I've seen a lot of projects get mired down by trying to do so many things or, try to like, launch before they're ready or that they've really like, perfected what they're trying to build. I would say just go for perfect on like one basic building block.
Awesome. I think that's especially good advice when you only have 30 days to go perfect as well. So
yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Robert, for the AMA. Really appreciated chatting with you and you fielding all the questions. And of course, having Compound as a sponsor of HackMoney. We're really excited to see what people build on Compound. And yeah, thank you again. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone here on the AMA. Really appreciated all of your questions. You can always continue to ask questions in our Discord, on Twitter, anywhere you find us. Happy to help out with what you're building. I'm really excited for everyone's hackathon projects, and keep up the great work, and carry Ethereum forward.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Robert.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
We can all wave goodbye.
Thanks.
There we go.
Thanks.
Okay, now I end it.